We need more people in serious roles shitposting on Twitter. It's fun for everyone.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Web3 Builders. I'm Evan Van Ness. I'm here with Will, and we are here with Harrison from Gaslight, also known as PopPunk on Chain on Twitter. Probably needs no introduction. As I just found out off camera, he is crushing it on Twitter with not that many followers. He is doing like 10x the impressions per month that I am. So, I'm just orders of magnitude behind him on, you know, views per follower, I guess would be that metric. Harrison, let's start by just like standard podcast question. Like, what is the very first moment that you heard about Ethereum?
Yeah, so I think the very first moment I heard about Ethereum was probably my sophomore year of college in 2015. I guess it was shortly after it came out, where I had a kid in my dorm that was buying stuff on some nefarious websites on the internet. As I've actually heard a lot of people have similar stories, but he was basically like, "Yeah, so I buy Ethereum. I use a Tumblr," which back then I'm like, "Oh, a Tumblr, that means like you can't trace it and stuff anymore." Now, knowing that it was not Tornado Cash. But yeah, he just like explained it and said what he was doing with it, and I started to look more into it, and I just started like buying ETH like slowly whenever I had money, which was I was in college, I was poor, I was making $10 an hour as a TA, so whenever I had just like spare money that I wasn't spending on beer, I was buying ETH, and I mean, yeah, it just really snowballed from there.
What year was this?
So this was 2015 and 2016, and then I graduated in 2017.
And so you graduated from college. What do you go off and do from there?
So I graduated with a computer science degree. For some reason, I was like really interested in working at a hedge fund, so I got a job at a hedge fund and just like immediately realized that was a bad decision. I
You
didn't
seem
like
like a
it.
super hedge fund guy to me, like my background.
It was rough. Like I didn't realize I'd have to like actually wear a suit to work to just like sit at a desk and write like Python and like PowerShell scripts. But the interesting thing was, even though I didn't like the work, I got really lucky, and my entire team there was also super into crypto, just like trading it, like reading about it. So yeah, like I stayed there because I really liked the team. I was there for like 6 or 7 months. Like it was a super short stint, and I just tried to get like deeper and deeper into crypto. I eventually landed at Gemini in 2019, where I worked for 2 years working on like the trading engine, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like I wanted to get deeper in crypto. I wanted to write smart contracts and stuff, but I was just doing Web2 dev there. Like it's really no different than if I worked at like New York Stock Exchange or something writing code because, yes, the assets on the exchange were crypto, but I wasn't interfacing with any of that. So yeah, and that's when I hopped from Gemini, super short stint at some like random fintech company, and then I finally was like, all right, I want to get into crypto, I want to get into Web3. How the hell do I do this? Because I've noticed that anyone can pick up an IDE and write code, but I wanted to do it like the professional route. Like I wanted to have a job at a Web3 company, and I knew that like it's a little bit gate kept. I might have to do something that I don't want to do, so I hate full stack development more than anything. I hate JavaScript. I hate TypeScript. But I see a job opening at a super small protocol called Homecoin Finance.
I like this guy.
Yeah, so I literally take the job, and for 9 months, I'm writing React like version 16. Like there's no like
Oh,
hooks or any no use effect. But I'm doing this. I hate it, but I'm like, this is my cheat code because like now I'm getting experience at one of these companies, so I'm more reputable. So now I had to think about like how do I go from this now to actually writing smart contracts. So I went to ETH Denver in 2021, wrote my first ever smart contract, absolutely fell in love with it. The project is actually funny. The project was it was hierarchical on-chain royalties that we were like targeting towards like open source projects. At the end of the day, it was fully a pyramid scheme, but our project was called NAPS, which stood for Not a Pyramid Scheme. Um, it won some bounties. That was super cool. And from there, I'm like, all right, I have experience, writing Solidity. I put basically every single waking minute of my life outside of work hours and weekends into writing smart contracts. And then I landed at Magna, which is a token distribution platform, where I led protocol engineering there for almost a year leading up to me starting Gaslight.
okay, so let's digress for a second.
Yes.
I gotta ask, what hedge fund? Because I'm curious, like which even back then that they were
Yeah.
already.
So I worked at AQR Capital.
Okay, so that's Asness, right?
Yup, Cliff Asness.
Okay, yeah, the famous, the only free lunch in finance is diversification. But yeah, it's huge now. I mean, it's like
Mm.
they have a whole bunch of mutual funds as well, products, right? So they're massive. But so the sort of the back office tech staff was already into crypto, or the finance
So
pros too, even back then.
so I was my team was like a bunch of just like random software engineers. We all did like kind of different stuff on the team. But one of the guys said he was like mining like Bitcoin in like the Howard University computer lab that he was like the lab manager of like way early on, probably like well way early on being like maybe like 2012, 2013. He was
These days,
mining.
you get arrested for that.
Yeah, but he was like, it was amazing, and he was like this Trinidadian guy. He had like an amazing accent, and just like the stories that he would tell us. He was like, I remember selling tens of thousands of Bitcoin super early on to buy like silly tech for my door stuff.
Yeah, and you were mostly writing Python? That surprised me because, like,
Yeah,
I mean, Python for data analysis, but I mean, I feel like if you need the speed, you usually end up in C or C++ plus plus or
yeah,
something like
so
that.
I was like a pretty unimportant engineer there. I wasn't writing like quant strategies and stuff. We were doing some like light analysis, a little bit of like pandas, but it was mostly just like Flask, like backend APIs to like make data more accessible for like the less technical people, and then just random PowerShell scripts to like automate processes on like their 2007 Windows servers.
But is that anything that you thought you were going to be doing when you were getting a comp sci degree? Like,
I mean, to me, like I was super excited because like I remember like right before I started, I watched like a season of the show Billions, and I'm like, it's gonna be super fast paced, it's gonna be amazing. And then I joined, and I'm like, why am I wearing a suit and drinking like Diet Coke in like a cubicle all day?
yeah, right. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to dig in was you said it's sort of gate kept, and I think I've seen you say that before, maybe like a year and some ago. That's really sad to me actually, because like the whole idea is supposed to be that it's not like that. Do you mean that like it's gate kept in the sense of like getting these jobs is hard because it's hard to figure out who's actually good at Solidity, or
Yeah, yeah. So it's there's sort of like a couple points to it. So like it's not gate kept in the sense where like anyone can like write their own stuff, can deploy an NFT contract, can like make money and stuff that way. But like if you want to really go the professional route, you want to get like a job as like a protocol engineer or something at like a reputable company, it's really hard to do. And especially like at that point that I was getting into it, because it's like a lot of companies don't really want to hire like a junior protocol engineer or someone with zero experience because obviously, money's at risk. They want to hire someone that has actual professional experience writing smart contracts and, have deployed a number of contracts that have facilitated, millions of dollars. But it's like, how do you get to that point if you're not already doing that at a company? Um, and that's something that I've noticed. Like when I was leading protocol engineering at Magno, we would get tons and tons and tons of applications for people that like would apply for like a senior level job, but they didn't have like the credentials, and they're like, please just look at it. And like even now, I get so many DMs, probably like it's not an understatement to say maybe 10 to 20 DMs a day of people just asking me like, how did you get into it? Like, how did you land a job at an actual company doing this?
and so what was the secret to you getting that job? Like, was it just that you'd gone deep enough down the rabbit hole from East Denver that you had stuff you could point to on GitHub?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it was like a mixture of like I did have experience like working at a crypto company. I was doing like at the closest I was getting to the blockchain was like writing like Web3 JS and like Ethers like calls and stuff. So it was like I had familiarity with like how Adapt works. But then the amount of time that I put into learning Solidity, I watched Patrick Collins' entire, I think that's the 32-hour course. The new one is the 27. But I watched that entire course like 3 times. I went through all of like crypto zombies. I read like all the audit reports from like the big firms. I read like every single smart contract for every DApp that like I had ever interacted with, and I'd like to say that I aped into it is an understatement. Like I was up until like 3, 4 a.m. every night, waking up in the morning working, and I think that's really how I was able to go from just writing silly dumb JavaScript at a company to actually leading protocol engineering at a company in like 3.5 months.
That's super impressive. How does that compare to like a lot of the comp sci? degrees kids get nowadays, and then like learning actually Web3 development. Because I think there's a lot of people come into the space like every bull cycle who are comp sci kids. They get
Mhm.
super excited by it, and then I never know what the trajectory for them is. If like it's even available, or do they have to double down and learn what you did?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure like fully because like I don't really know anyone that's like graduating college now. Most honestly, the most of the people that I like work with nowadays and like some of the best developers that I've met are either, studied something completely different in college or like dropped out and are just self-taught. I definitely think that if I was going to do everything over again, I probably wouldn't go to college and just like wouldn't study computer science. But I think that the path a lot of times seems to just be like if you really want to like succeed and land a solid job in this industry, you have to put in like a ton of time just learning on your own because the odds of landing like a really junior or like early stage job in this industry, I think it's so hard, especially because the space is blowing up. More and more people every single day want to get into it. Like just look at how many security auditors there are now. There's probably 5 times as many auditors as devs. So I just think it's a super competitive space.
I'm curious about any false starts you had when you were going down that Solidity rabbit hole. Like what didn't work?
I mean, it was definitely super tough. Like the actual language of Solidity to me was just like really like nothing I'd written before because I was just writing like a bunch of Python, like some super functional Scala and stuff like that, some Kotlin. But yeah, I would say like the language of Solidity was probably the only tough thing to me, but like I just was willing to like put so much time into it to just like get past that. But other than that, really no like pitfalls.
If you were going back and doing it again, do you feel like there is some like Pareto principle where you got 80% of the result from 20% of the effort in all of this? Like, is there one thing that worked better than others, like reading audit reports?
Yeah, I mean, I think that reading audit reports is definitely super, super important because you're actually like starting to get exposure to like really, really complex smart contracts and stuff like that. Like I would read like Uniswap's audit reports and stuff like that. And it's good to like kind of like throw something that's like way over your head at you and try and learn from that, as opposed to like there are still like a lot of like courses and stuff that you can take or like paid Udemy courses where it's like okay, like your curriculum is to write a lottery smart contract and then like a super simple escrow smart contract. And at the end, they're like, all right, you're ready, like go get a job.
Yeah, yeah. The idea that you could become a junior Solidity developer, I mean, I don't like, yeah, it's there basically is no job. I'm not sure when there will be, frankly. I mean, it's
I don't know.
we're still very early on that one.
Yeah. I mean, we did something really, really interesting though at Gaslight. So we had an intern for the summer, and the goal was to take someone who has absolutely zero experience with Solidity and teach them how to like do gas optimization audits of smart contracts. And that was a super interesting process. Definitely, obviously we're taking someone who's pretty much barely ever looked at Solidity smart contracts, and it was fun to like explain really like how the EVM works and like teach them Solidity, but like almost on the side. And it's like have them first focus on like how the EVM works, like look at smart contracts. They might even not like fully understand them, but like start to point out like patterns and stuff with like gas optimization and things that we fix. And then our intern Eliza was like learning it on the side, and I think it was an amazing experience.
Did you learn anything in particular about how to make that happen? Like just focus on the EVM and
Yeah, I mean, I think that the EVM is super important, obviously, because at the end of the day, like you can write, your Solidity, your smart contracts, deploy them, but like, what good is it if you don't really like understand what's going on behind the scenes? Like, obviously, for other languages, like it's fine if you don't know how like the Java virtual runtime or whatever works, or like the Python interpreter, because like it's not that big of a deal. But like with Solidity, money's usually on the line. Like there's like optimization to be done. Like you might not realize, like if you just jump in and like write some crazy nested for loop, that a transaction could cost $1,000 to like just like that.
so one thing that you are sort of known for is, or I guess you've had a few tweets about lately, is saying that you think that some of the smaller audit shops are better for the money, or that's who you'd use.
I think it's really a blend of all of them. So like when I worked at Magna, I did audits with many different companies. Pretty sure before I joined, they were doing audits with Certic, but that switched real fast. Did audits with like Trail of Bits, Zelic, Ottersec, like some really like medium to like really large, prominent sized auditors. And then after I left there, I started anything that I wanted audited. I would go to a solo auditor and like we work with Pashoff Crumb, who's arguably one of the best solo auditors like in the world on Gaslight stuff, and it's sort of just like a really more positive experience in my opinion. Obviously, I think a lot of these solo auditors work ridiculously hard, and I think they might be putting in more time than a lot of these audit firms. That's not to say all of them, but they're really really hardworking, and they're personable, and like the back and forth that you can have with them is great. And at the end of the day too, like you could go to an audit firm that would charge you 50K a week, and you'd have like a 2 week audit, spend 100 grand, or you could get a similar if not better job done from a solo auditor for a third of the price. So I think it's really a blend of like the work ethic, like the responsiveness, and the price.
Did you ever have like an experience where you tried to negotiate who it would be, or reading reading people's individual audits before you like accepted them as their?
Yeah. So I can't, I don't want to name the firm, but there was a case where at my prior company we did audits with two different companies, or sorry, the same company but on two different occasions. And on one of the audits, the audit quality was super great, super responsive. But in one of the other occasions, the second one actually, the audit was terrible. It was like pretty much facilitated fully through Telegram. We didn't even get like a pre-audit report or like a final report until we asked for it like weeks and weeks later. So this is kind of like the reverse of like I actually had a really positive experience the first time, and I wish I should have known to ask for the same people the second time, because the second time like it was basically like I got an A+ audit the first time and like a D- audit the second time.
Curious about like the number of audits and like pricing for this sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of like security audits, like in the past when I had like was writing smart contracts and we would get them audited, at Magno we only had a couple smart contracts, so we just typically did one round of audits with one auditing firm. But a lot of these bigger, protocols with substantially higher budgets, like VC funding and stuff, like a lot of them, like especially like I was surprised to find out that like companies that I work with now on gas audits, they'll do a gas audit and then they'll do a solo auditor reviews their code, and then they'll do like a code arena, and then after the code arena they'll do a firm audit. So it's like three levels of that. I believe that Badger DAO, I think, did that recently, where they went through like so many different rounds of audits. I think that's great. Obviously, like you're spending a lot of money, but in terms of safety, it's insane because like we read all these like instances where auditors, even top tier auditing firms, like they can miss like a vulnerability. Like obviously, no one's perfect. Even like the best firms, the best auditors can still miss stuff. So I think the line of defense is great. You just have to have a lot of money for that.
Yeah, and frankly, like I have read some audit reports of from big firms where like they will tell you in coded terms like we didn't find everything and we know we didn't find everything, right? We only had a couple weeks, and like this code base is a work in progress and is not ready for production. And it's sort of interesting because a lot of times these protocols then go say like, look, like Trail of Bits audited us, and then I read the report and Trail of Bits is like um, that's an amusing thing. And it gets to like, I just the market is really inefficient for these auditors.
Mm.
That was one of the questions I had for you, because you've gone on this crusade against Certic, which I think you're a hero for, because like I've been bothered by the fact that the market is extremely inefficient, but I just haven't really wanted to like say anything. And it's objectively true that like they have been, the things that they have audited have been hacked a crazy amount. But like when there's that much of a pattern and objectively like the audit report is not good, and that is actually not a seal of approval, I don't know, like how do we make the market more efficient? I mean, is there anyone else that you'd like to name and shame?
So I guess in terms of like auditors, the only people I really like think are worth name and shaming is Certic, and it's always crazy because I've garnered thousands of likes, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of impressions at this point talking about Certic, and I've only had one person replying defending them, and it's an account with 2 followers that a bunch of their likes are just Certic stuff. So I don't want to make any accusations, but it's like it's known that like Certic is putting out really poor quality audits. They're just churning them out, and it's tough because like they'll make like defenses and stuff. Like I guess I want to bring up the Z Casino thing from recently. I'm not sure. For anyone that doesn't know, basically there was this like ZK gambling app. They posted something really egregious, like a really offensive, like fucked up meme on Twitter. And then Lawrence replied, and he's like, "I'm waiting for you to like get exploited or something crazy like that." And they're like, "Good luck." And then the next day, they disclosed that they had a vulnerability, and it was basically something that was in Certic's audit report, but they flagged it as informative, meaning it's not really an issue. The team didn't even do anything to fix it. Um, and Certic was like, "Look, we pointed this out. We pointed this out." But the thing is, like, the issue boiled down to like they were using chain link VRF to generate like random words. And it has a thing where it's like if over the course of I think they had it set to 200 blocks, if they can't like get the words back or whatever, like if gas is high for 200 blocks, the user can refund their bet. So Certic was like, oh yeah, if the blockchain is super congested, like this could happen. Whereas they didn't mention the fact that this could very easily be artificially done by someone. So like we did, me and some friends did some calculations, and on Polygon it would basically cost $6,000 to place a bet that if you weren't going to win, you could instantly take back. So essentially, you're infinitely winning. So based on like that information, this should have been marked as a critical vulnerability. Had Certic have marked it as a critical vulnerability, Z Casino 100% would have fixed it. But because they were just like blah blah blah, if the network is busy, this could maybe happen. This happens.
It was on Polygon. Okay, that's the bit I didn't realize. Yeah, so it's I mean it's an economic attack. That's fascinating. No, go ahead.
Side note: I love how you mentioned drinking Diet Cokes and you've been ripping a White Claw. Where is that Celsius?
It's a Celsius.
Okay, I was like, yeah, that's good. It's a good change of pace.
Did you do any of the like the Securiums or any of
No,
these other boot camps? No.
no.
Okay.
So I didn't do any boot camps and stuff. I basically like I learned and like got into gas optimization by looking at previous contracts that were written before I joined Magna by like interns and contractors, and it really just started as like me refactoring like one of the contracts, and I like learned about like the hard hat gas reporting feature at the time we were using hard hat, and I'm like. I almost started to like gamify it, and it's like, how much can I make the gas go down here and here? Like, I want to see number go down. So I like randomly started to tweet about it. Blew up from like 0 to 10K in like a couple months. There were always people that were like interested in gas, but weren't really like ripping companies for being inefficient and like posting a lot of tips and tricks. And that just scaled to like I would write threads and companies just started to like DM me and they're like, "Hey, do you want to review our code?" And literally like the gas audit was born from there.
What's the pipeline like now? Like, do you have more than you can handle of just people just want to?
Yes, yeah. So we're like pretty much fully booked all through October. Like already, we have like people lining up. We have to start taking deposits, so we know that people are like really serious about it. And the craziest thing is, we're pretty much turning down about 75% of people that reach out to us, just because we're at a point where we can have a really premium pricing model. So we have to like weigh the pros and cons. If like a company comes to us, they have a ton of lines of code, we give them a quote, and they can afford to pay like a fifth of that. Like it sucks. We have to turn them away. We're turning them away to zero. We don't have competitors, so it's like it's unfortunate, but we have to like basically spend our time where it's the most important. And that's why we have a lot of stuff in the mix for Gaslight in the future, in the very very near future.
Tell us a little bit about like hiring and like the dynamics of Twitter. We've complained a lot about Twitter on this show because it's, I guess we're not getting as many likes or we're not as funny as we thought we once were. But in terms of like building a business, are you finding it still to be a useful place for you? And then tell me a little bit about like hiring and bringing in like new Web3 builders in the midst of a bear market.
Yeah, I mean, like I literally credit the entire birth and success of Gaslight to Twitter. Like so far, every single protocol that we've ever worked with has come through a cold Twitter DM to me, just saying like, "Hey, we saw your tweet. Do you want to work with us?" We've never done outreach. We have no BD person. No one's out there cold, DMing protocols saying, "Hey, like, do you want a gas audit?" It's all just been organic growth, and I think it's super important. And like, as I continue to build this brand and like build the company, we're very quickly going to be at the point where it's like we can't like me myself like alone and like maybe contracting a couple people, like we just don't have enough bandwidth for the amount of interest in the gas audits. So like on our future roadmap, like we want to have people doing BD, we want people reaching out, but that means we're going to have an exponential more amount of audits. So we're definitely going to be scaling the team. And the really interesting thing about that is like not that many people are into gas optimization, but I run a group chat called Optimization Fans with 100 of like the best devs like in the world, and we just shit post and talk about gas optimization all the time. So I know that like when the time comes and I need to scale the team, like I already have a pool of like at least out of those 100, like 30 hyper qualified people to bring on.
So that's basically you have that group chat, and that's how you've found your contractors, and that is your future employees. That's
Pretty
brilliant.
much, yeah. Like, and it's also interesting. Like, the goal for that was never really that. I just wanted to like put like all the like minds really in the same room, like people that are conscious about gas, network health, and stuff like that. And then my co-founder and I just kept talking about it, and it's like, holy shit! Like when we scaled, like did we accidentally like build like the perfect candidate pool for us? And it turns out we did.
How do you balance the security versus the gas optimization when you are doing your audits, right?
Yeah, so me personally, I do zero security auditing. Like the only I'll make like a recommendation if I see something like egregious, but like I don't really have like that mind to think about like security in a way where like I feel like I know enough about security auditing to charge for that. But we have a ton of customers that reach out and they're like, "Hey, we'd love like security and gas." And in those cases, we have solo auditors that will bring on and sort of like attack it with us, and we'll split it with them. I think that's a really good approach. Like my goal isn't really to build like an auditing firm that's like a full security firm and a full like gas firm. My goal is to have like just an all-encompassing like gas company. And it's like the cases where somebody also wants gas, like I basically have a guy that I can bring in to work on that with us.
So when we saw like NFTs pop off, NFT mints and NFT dynamics are different than like the DeFi a lot of people got used to when they're building applications. So how do you think about that when you're like building the pipeline out? Have you seen like people becoming specialized in certain types of dApps when it comes to audits, or is it still like pretty generalistic? Anyone can kind of
Yeah, I
handle.
mean there is like a pretty like there's a little bit of specification and like people really like learning one thing really well. Like for example, Zero X Saigar, he's really really good at like security and gas optimization, like specifically on like NFT smart contracts and stuff. And there's a reason why he works with like basically every like blue chip NFT company when they drop something else. Like he has crazy experience with it, and he just like knows like ERC 721A, that standard, and everything really really well. I'm not really sure of anyone else that really has it like honed in on like specifically DeFi. And it's just interesting for gas because every smart contract, like at the end of the day, is like really similar enough for us with gas audits. Like we're looking for like the first 20% of an audit is usually looking for the same things, and then it's just we got to go through everything.
If I guess earlier it sort of sounded like sometimes you have customers that come to you first and then they do security after you've optimized it. Now you're saying you also have people that come to you and ask for both. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
here's my code
So
base. I'm ready to ship. Oh wait, like give me some security and some gas.
yeah,
How does that work? Like, how do you work on that internally? I'm curious.
yeah. So like we do have like some firms that like they don't have their security audit lined up. Like they're not doing a C4A. They haven't like put time on like an auditor's calendar. The people that haven't done that, if they're interested, like sometimes they'll be like, "You do gas, do you also do security?" And in those cases, we'll bring in a security auditor. But a lot of these other companies, they already have like their massive audit booked out for a month, 2, 3 month long like audit with a big firm, but they come to us for gas first. And those are the cases where like we just do gas. I definitely recommend that everyone does gas before security, just because nobody's perfect. Like my optimizations, like knock on wood, to this day, have yet to introduce a security vulnerability. But I would always love like I go into it. You go through a security audit, and then our pricing includes we'll look at your code again after the security audit.
So even when you do like the gas and security together, it's basically you're doing the gas and then you're giving it to your guy that does the security,
Yeah,
sort of like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
subsequently.
yeah.
Okay, I
Totally.
just wanted to,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm strictly just doing the gas.
Okay, I was curious. Is there some like interweaving it in some weird way that I don't understand? But it didn't really make any sense to me, so it makes sense that the answer is no. I guess on that note, question from my list is Brock Elmore has this. I don't know how he says it. Free pie. It's his security pattern. When you read that, what do you feel? Because I know he calls out optimizers in in the blog post.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like definitely I value security way more than optimization. Like security, I always hold to a higher regard. And that's why we optimize super, super safely. Like, we're not going in and like converting your entire code base to assembly. Obviously, if you didn't have assembly in your code beforehand, most likely it's for a reason you don't want it. So all of our optimization is really in security. There's a bunch of other misconceptions too. It's like, oh, you're going to make our code unreadable, but in most cases, with gas optimization, your code is clearer, and the logic is more evident because, ideally we have less lines of code, the logic is less convoluted. And then the other thing is like we're not going in there and removing like validation to make sure like, oh, like you were previously checking to see if these two array lengths were equal, like that costs a little bit of gas, like we're going to remove that. No, like there are definitely a lot of trade-offs that we make where the gas cost is slightly higher than we could theoretically make it. And that's because security is the most important thing. Like I've had this discussion a couple times with Patrick Collins, and like we're both on the same page that it's like the only time that gas is sometimes good is if you're leaving gas because security is more important in that sense.
So basically, what I hear you saying is like, all right, you can have your gas good if you need that required statement to be
Exactly.
sure of that invariant.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so not that actually that spicy on this one.
Yeah.
Today you tweeted about Milady Cola, who they balked at the price of your audit, and then they did a pretty gas intensive whitelist instead of doing a Merkle root check. So I would call this like I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but a basic architectural decision that they got wrong, and versus like a tactical, you're in the weeds of the code and like not to use this solidity whatever because it's slightly higher gas. I'm curious as to what, like, when you find stuff, is it like how often is it basic architecture versus tactical?
I mean, I would say the greater majority of the time, like probably 60 to 70% of the time, it's really simple stuff like that you just don't think about because it's sort of like the same reason why like QA teams exist is like you don't want the software engineers to also be writing like the tests in like these whatever like big companies, financial institutions. You want another set of eyes on it. And like I'm even guilty of this sometimes too. Like I'll write a contract and I'll just like write it really quickly, overthink something, and I'm like, oh crap, like I could have optimized that. I think it's a lot easier to see these things when you're like an outside set of eyes looking in on someone else's work. But a lot of the times, yeah. And a lot of these things usually boil down to just like really critical mistakes made in like batch functions, like loops, like not realizing that like, oh, in a transaction, like you actually pay gas for a view function, things where it's like, oh, I could have cached this beforehand instead of recomputing every single time. So most of the time, these things are just like common silly mistakes, but they're really important because they go missed.
Like, what's the worst gas example that would make a Solidity, like a junior Solidity developer, which doesn't really exist, as we said earlier, but that would make a Solidity developer square?
The worst thing I ever saw in a smart contract, it was like probably back in like February maybe, where I had like 200 followers, but it was like my first like quote unquote like viral tweet. And it was basically like a company that I saw that had a NFT contract where they could do batch mints, and their batch mint function accepted two arrays. It was an array of addresses and an array of amounts, and they did a for loop through. They basically did a nested for loop. So it's like we're gonna loop through each address, and then we're gonna loop up to n many times that that NFT should receive each time. Whereas this should have just been ERC 721A. And I did the benchmarks and stuff, and I'm pretty sure that my implementation was like 400 times cheaper than theirs. And I reached out to them, and they were basically like, "Oh, we're just not going to use that smart contract. Thank you."
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I want to bring up the PayPal story, which like you also tweeted about when they were launching their PayPal stablecoin. Obviously, we had that news like last week where they're like bringing it public now. Tell us like a little bit about that story. I'm also curious, like just thinking about like all the stuff you do for free, just by I guess to learn, and be curious to know if like you encourage people to go do that as part of like the process of being a developer in this space.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely I'll answer the second part first. I think it's always important that like our space is evolving so quick, and like there's an endless amount of information, and like nobody knows everything. So I like encourage, and like most devs that I know are just constantly learning, and it's like that phrase where it's like everyone in Web3 is terminally online, but it really is true that like people are always online, they're always like researching new stuff. So I definitely encourage all of that. In terms of the PayPal thing, that was just super interesting to see that like they deploy a smart contract with a version of Solidity that's like 5 years old, which like kind of makes me think that, hey, like maybe they wrote this code 5 years ago, put it on the shelf, and then decided, oh shit, let's launch it now, and didn't even revisit it. That was super interesting. I got a lot of just funny shit posts and Twitter engagement out of that whole PayPal situation. Um, a lot of people are upset that it's like centralized and they can like freeze funds and stuff like that, but that's pretty standard with other stable coins like Circle and stuff. um, I do think it's interesting. I think it'll bring a lot of people not really into Web3 but using Web3 kind of without like knowing a lot about it. But
I think that it's the Paxos code, right? So I
yeah,
think that's
yeah,
part
it's
of why it's
so
so old.
IUSD is super old.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who has written a stablecoin for a major American financial institution, and of course it's sitting there on the shelf, right? And that's, it's ready to launch and has been for however long, but will they ever launch it, right? Like, who knows? So the whole just sitting there on the shelf is
Yeah.
definitely a thing. And I have to contain myself because I want to tweet about it. Like, when are they going to launch it? But
Well, why don't they update it like when they're going to launch it? Like it's going to be in production at some point, so why not like 3 6 months
Oh no,
before?
I mean, I feel like if they have to like go back and update it again, I feel like it's just gonna have to go through like crazy reviews, like legal compliance and stuff again, probably.
So just like ship it, whatever.
I guess like that's my interpretation of it.
That's funny. That's weird.
as I recall, the PayPal thing was actually going to launch on Sequelana, and then they blew up or whatever. I don't know. And that's actually why it ended up uh, not launching. Is, I don't know, FTX, whatever. Um, you are also a noted Sequelana critic. Maybe you don't use my nomenclature, but that's okay. I like my meme. I'm gonna stick with it. I guess what is it for you? Because I don't know, you're up there in terms of noted critics with me.
Yeah, I mean, like, so for me, like, I don't really hate Solana that much. Like, a lot of this literally started as a joke. In full disclosure, when I worked at Magna, I wrote pretty much equally as many Solidity contracts as I did Rust for Solana because Magna was multi-chain. But I absolutely hated the developer experience. Like Rust with Anchor like framework, it felt like they were trying to make it as hard as possible for you. Like it just seemed like a black box. They were abstracting so much stuff away from me. Who's to say like if I didn't do Solidity first and maybe I started with Solana, I'd be just shilling Solana right now. Probably not, but I'm
You'd
really
be the single solitary dev on Solana.
I'd be the only dev on Solana. But I think it's funny that like I can write a shit post about Solana and have the founder of Solana replying to it and getting angry about it, which I think
Oh,
is it's hysterical. And like it's great for engagement and stuff. And it's just funny to like every once in a while like throw a quick jab. And I stand by the fact that I think Solana is the angriest community in crypto.
so, yeah, good vibes only, as he says, of course, right? Like, it's such a gaslight. Uh, pun intended. Trolley Tolly was not good vibes only. He got very obsessed with me and sent like his entire army of Potemkin village of paid account trolls at me for like a while.
I do have to respect the people that just will never let stuff go. Like in especially like in Web3, like crypto Twitter, it's like I remember the day that like Pauly0x he launched that token Poncoin, and I broke the news. Like I just wrote a tweet and I'm like, do not buy this token. Anyone can steal it from anyone else because they took a test version of a smart contract from Solidity that allowed anyone to transfer anyone else's balance just whenever you wanted. So I tweeted that and it blew up, got like a million impressions, and all of his fans still to this day DM me, reply to me, and they're like, when are you going to retract that statement? Like it was supposed to be in there. And I'm like, yeah, but like it wasn't supposed to be in there. They launched a new token. Anyone that like bought that token with ETH on day one lost all of their money because everyone stole it. And to this day, it's been like 3 months. I'll get like a reply and a DM every day. It's like, retract this statement, say that you're a fake developer.
So you don't have anything like philosophical about Sequelana that specifically jibes with you, or just bad developer experience and
I mean, so it's bad developer experience. I do think it's funny that like what was it like 10 to 15% of all Solana is like locked up with FTX, and obviously like it wouldn't happen this way, but I think the funniest outcome would be if like they were able to just like dump it all in a market order immediately and just like instantly send the price to zero. It'll obviously never happen, but like I would love to see that happen.
yeah, it'll be like on the day of the pandemic where the price of oil went negative, and so they were paying people in the futures market. All right, let's talk about L2, because I've been asking people for a while, like, when will people start caring about L2 gas? And I actually think our first interview, Will, was with Austin, and I asked him that, and he was like, whatever. And actually, that's basically what everyone has said until I asked you. And you said, oh no, actually, a majority of our audits now are L2. Have you done any ZK rollup app optimizations?
We haven't done any ZK rollup app stuff though, but it's basically like some of our biggest customers have been on, these L2s. There's really like, I guess, three reasons why like someone on an L2 will want to like get an audit from us. First and foremost is like, obviously, yes, base gas prices are lower. But if you're still doing like crazy bulk actions and stuff and tons of transactions a day, it's still going to stack up. So like, obviously, you still want to, reduce transaction costs. The other reason, and one of like the more important ones, is we say that like on mainnet Ethereum we optimize for transaction costs, but on L2s we optimize for transaction computation ability. So like these L2s, you still have 30 million gas units per block. That can make the difference between can you batch mint 100 things, or if we optimize for you, can you batch mint 1,000 things? And that really comes down to like user experience. Like someone on a DApp, they have to sign as few transactions as possible. If we just like cycle slowly back to what I said though about like optimizing for transaction costs on an L2, um, call data is super expensive on an L2. You're going to post the call data back to the L1, and we do a lot. Fortunately, Optimizer has written a library in Solidity called, I think it's just called Solidity.js, but we're basically compressing call data, which is really, really nice. And like it's optimizing there. And then the last reason why someone on an L2 will reach out to us is they're on an L2 because they think they can only be on an L2. So they think that like the way that their contracts are, the way that their code behaves, it's just way too expensive to be on an L1. And the most prime example we had of that was we did a large scale audit with Radiant Capital like super early on when I started doing this, and we were able to optimize a lot of their flows up to 88% for some of their super expensive actions. And I mean, it seemed like from inception, Radiant always thought we have to be on an L2. But I did these optimizations, they ran the numbers, and they were able to make a DAO proposal, and they're going to be deploying to ETH mainnet now, which is sick because it's like for some of these L2s, we can unlock more liquidity for them because obviously the liquidity will always be on ETH mainnet. You have to go through the trouble of like, oh, so you have to get MetaMask and you have to bridge and stuff, and like nobody new wants to do that. But yeah, those are really the three reasons why like L2 gas is important. So anyone that tweets like, oh, we're on an L2, it doesn't matter, like that's not true.
I hear what I hear you saying as well is that basically it's not that much of a difference to optimize for L2, which surprises me.
Yeah, I mean, so like a lot of the times, like obviously compute on an L2 is way less, just like the base gas costs and stuff. But we're still doing the same quality of audit every single time, even though compute is not that important on an L2. We're still optimizing your protocol the same we would on mainnet, if not more, because we're doing these optimizations at the DApp level where we're actually compressing your call data beforehand. Like I think that like L2s will continue to be more and more of our revenue just because so many companies are building on L2s, they're building these casinos, Web3 games and stuff. And I think that they'll start to wonder as we work with more companies like, hey, could we actually do this on ETH mainnet? Is this feasible on ETH mainnet?
We have Eigenlayer and all these other things going on. How are you thinking about that from a development standpoint? I feel like the treadmill is just like increasing in pace always. And that's why we always have these hacks, right? And that's why auditors are so expensive. And now we're talking not only about like L2s, but we're talking about like restaking and restaking primitives and all the things that are going to be built on that. As an auditor, how do you even like start like grokking those ideas?
Yeah, I mean, it's super hard. Like, I can't stay on top of everything. Like, as much as I would like to, I work crazy hours. I can't stay on top of everything. So, like, when these new things come out, I really have to, like, kind of learn it on the job as I'm doing an audit. I'm like, oh, I've never seen this library before. Like, let me put a couple hours in beforehand to, like, look at this or, like, read about this new protocol and stuff. Like, as an auditor, and more specifically, being the only gas auditor, it's, like, a nightmare.
When do you think you'll get competition?
So we actually kind of almost have competition. So like super early on in Gaslight, this fund basically wanted to acquire us like a weekend for some like mega predatory offer, and I'm like, I'm not giving my company away right now. So recently they spun up like a consulting group to do gas optimization, but have seen nothing come out of them yet. But I want competition, like, because all it's going to do is just like solidify like how important gas optimization is. And also at the end of the day, it's like, I don't care if I'm making less money. I care that like everyone is, everyone has efficient smart contracts. And the biggest thing is like right now, I hate that I have to turn someone away and they don't get gas optimization.
Did you raise money? Like you had a tweet about that. I wasn't sure if it was a joke or not. Or
Uh,
were you trying to raise money?
if I tweeted anything about that, it was a joke. We haven't raised money.
Okay, because I was like, I mean, you're clearly making money, right? So,
Yeah, no, we're fully bootstrapped and have been profitable literally since like day one. Like, there's really no expenses other than like random payroll stuff we pay for, like Slack.
and so, like, what is the? I guess maybe first we should, before I talk about vision for Gaslight, because you've hinted at it, and maybe you're not going to give it away here, but before we get into that, like, tell us about Drop. Like, was there one specific moment where you're like, we have to do a gas efficient airdrop product? I can't take it anymore.
Yeah, so actually, this isn't even my first like efficient airdrop that I wrote. So when I was working at Magna, we launched when tokens. Basically, like I think the block did a story about it. We launched it like at ETH Denver. It was just an efficient airdrop for ERC20s and ERC721s. Or sorry, no, just ERC20 and ETH. And then that was back in February or March, and I've learned so much more since then. And I'm like, I want to redo this. I want to save more gas, and I want to add the ability to airdrop NFTs because there's a bunch of airdrop tools out there in general that just are A, inefficient, and B, for some reason charge you like a base fee per every like NFT. So it's like you want to airdrop 1,000 NFTs. Oh, you also have to pay $7,000, which is absurd to me. So that was really the big motivation for like rewriting when tokens was like, I want a new app, I want a new smart contract that supports NFTs because there's literally no good way to batch send NFTs. So I had like a break for like a week and I just wrote it, built it, got it audited, and shipped it.
By the way, I should out to the people who are listening that you have a very cool Gaslight neon sign behind you.
And a hat.
And a hat.
Yeah, yeah. He's living the brand
And a
already.
Milady shirt, I think. I can't.
And a Milady t shirt. There is no meme.
I thought.
Can you explain the Milady thing to me? Because I do feel like that is tied into your brand, and I don't understand it at all.
Yeah.
Sorry, like something
So
about it's like what like, optimizers are all Miladies because of you, because of somebody else. Like
no,
what's
okay.
going on here?
So okay, so for the longest time I was so against NFTs. I'm like, they're so dumb, they're so dumb. And then I just started to see like a bunch of really cool, like when I joined Twitter, a bunch of really smart developers that I was learning a lot from had this profile picture, and I'm like, what the hell is this? Find out it's a Milady, and I start seeing it more and more, and I'm like, I start to like kind of get deep in like their lore and culture, and it's like the whole thing with Milady is it's really like the antithesis of NFTs. Like they promise no utility. They're not like building all this like cringe stuff, and it's just like a bunch of people that like don't really care. They all like have the same image. They recommend that if you can't afford one, you just copy and paste someone else's. Like I think it's really just like the funniest thing because it's like anti NFT culture. So yeah, I mean, I bought it, and I've met so many of like these people just like at events that they throw like IRL, and it's just like on the timelines they're psychopaths, but in person it's like some of the like nicest people that I've ever met.
Didn't they just get like busted as a co-founder was a Fed or something?
All
Yeah,
the co-founders are
so
suing each other.
yeah, they dropped the lawsuit on 9/11, so it's called Milady 9/11.
Oh my goodness.
That does seem very NFT project right there, though.
Yeah, that
Although, like,
is.
everybody's suing each other over
Yeah,
money.
but that's like the thing is like you gotta like expect like they're running like an 8-figure business. Like obviously it's gonna be like incorporated. Like, it's gonna be an LLC, right? Like I don't know what these people thought.
That's too much.
Right on. Okay, so tell us about the vision for Gaslight.
Yeah, so I mean, I have like so much stuff that's going to be announced like in a month, so I'm just trying to make sure I don't leak anything. But like,
You should though.
Nobody watches our show anyway. Don't worry about it.
So even a
I mean,
taste would be nice.
so like basically like what I can say is like Gaslight started as gas audits, but like that's like just the beginning.
Will that be more products, more education, just
It's
all of that?
it's gonna be
More
everything.
miladies.
Gonna be everything. Everything.
We did get a question on Twitter about you being a non, but you're clearly not a non,
Yeah,
and
that's the thing. Is
that's just a
like
milady.
I don't know why people like think that I'm anonymous because like I'm fully doxxed. If you just search Gaslight on LinkedIn, like you'll see my full name, where I went to high school, like everything. Like, I've never wanted to be anonymous, but for some reason, like people tweeted me and they're like, "Why don't you ever like post what you look like?" And I'm like, I do that like pretty often.
Yeah. Well, I retweeted this episode out with a picture of you, so you're doxxed
Perfect.
one way or the other.
The 182 tattoo. Are you a big Blink
Yeah.
182 fan?
So the 182 tattoo is literally like I am the biggest Blink 182 fan of all time. I saw them twice on their reunion tour in New York City. Like, yeah, so many people ask me, they're like, "What does 182 mean?" I'm like, "Look at me, I have like a dangly like cross earring and stuff. Like, clearly it's Blink 182."
Yeah, the fact that people wanted to know that, I was like, what else could it be? But I figured I'd ask. And I feel like asking the cringe question about, do you drive a car and whether it's an electric vehicle, I have to ask as well.
So I do drive a car, and it is a Tesla. It is an electric. But I
He lives his values indeed.
Wow.
I do. I did, though. I moved 3 months ago to Brooklyn, so I don't really need the car anymore. So it's like back where I used to live, and I'm gonna be selling it because I don't need it. But yes, I really did practice what I preached. No gas.
Oh, how's Brooklyn so far? That's actually a good capping question. I feel like you walk down there and you'll just hear like Eigenlayer on the street corner. You'll hear like people talk about NFTs in a cafe. It's just like,
Yeah,
especially
I mean,
Williamsburg.
so I'm in Bushwick. I don't really hear as much about that.
Okay.
But I have met like a ton of people randomly in Bushwick that are into crypto. Like one day, I tweeted a picture from like the local coffee shop I go to every morning, and someone that follows me replied, and he's like, "Dude, that's the coffee shop I go to every day. I live 2 blocks away. Like, come hang out." And I just like pulled up to his apartment.
I'm just sort of curious. Is somebody, like, I made a joke to Vitalik when we interviewed him about like nobody who is like relatively new to this space, and you're not really new to the space, but you didn't do Solidity until 2021. Like, you probably don't run into consensus people at all, despite living in Bushwick. It's
No,
sort of
I don't think I ever have. The one thing I did see is in my local grocery store last night was shopping with my girlfriend, and she goes, "Look, he has a Solana tote bag." And that was tough.
They give those to everybody.
Did you say anything?
No, I didn't. I'm a coward.
All right. On that note, we'll end this recording. Thank you for joining us. And any closing words aside from gas bad?
I mean, obviously, gas bad. And then the last thing is like we need more people in serious roles shit posting on Twitter. It's fun for everyone. Yeah, I encourage everyone to just shit post on Twitter.
Amazing.